A quick show note. I originally released half of this episode a year ago, and now, in its entirety, Jon Greenbaum on the last days of capitalism.
Come on, Rochester, celebrate.
Rockport's been around.
Yeah, when I think really old, I think 80, 85. That's what I think.
85. Then you're dead. Yeah.
Sorry, Grandma.
Yeah, I got a 84-year-old dad. I think he's got another 10 years in him. We'll see.
Yeah, my grandma's 92.
No shit.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it's not great.
Yeah.
Now, she's not dying, but she's deteriorating.
Yeah, I just spent Christmas, days after Christmas with my father-in-law. And he's a former marathon runner, and he's like 82, and it's like, he's just slipping. It's hard to watch.
It's definitely, like, I when I visited Grandma.
And he still ties one on.
Oh, he does.
Every night. It's like, maybe you're hungover.
Yeah, he could
Your
be.
grandma's not tying him. No. But I'm sorry I interrupted.
No, it's all right. Because she has cataracts, and she's legally blind at this point. And she's in a home, and the most depressing thing recently was my mom went to visit her, took a bunch of pictures of her, and she didn't know the camera was on her.
Oh, yeah.
So she couldn't, she didn't know to turn toward the camera.
Mm-hmm.
And that was just, ugh.
Well, blind is blind.
Yeah. And when I visited her a few months ago, and I need to go back, but, it's just difficult.
Yeah.
But I will.
Yeah.
She didn't quite know me.
Okay.
So there's dementia, definitely.
Yeah.
It took her a while to warm up.
Yeah.
And it's just difficult to see.
Right.
And feel. We're getting in Terry Gross territory.
Yeah.
Okay. We can start the official.
Okay.
Well, I like to start all of these the same way. What's your full name at birth, and what do you do?
My full name at birth, Jonathan Michael Corsini Greenbaum, born in Prospect Heights, Brooklyn. And what do I do?
Mm-hmm.
So for a living, I am a community organizer. I believe, my card says coordinator Neighbors Rock program. But yeah, I'm somebody who works with residents who are either looking to form a neighborhood group or already in one. Yeah.
How do you get from Brooklyn to Rochester?
Oh, yeah. So my folks were born in Brooklyn and in the 30s, and Brooklyn didn't seem so cool in the early 60s, So for them, the dream was going out to Long Island. So that's where I was raised, and I got into college, went up to southern tier of New York, beautiful valley in Binghamton, SUNY Binghamton, and never went back to Long Island. It's not as fun as Upstate. Upstate is much better than Long Island.
What's the best part of? Well, better question. Like comparing Long Island versus Upstate.
Yeah.
Why is it better?
Why is Upstate better? Upstate still has, Rochester still has parts of it that have not, you have the Strip in Henrietta and in Greece, right? And so it's corporate chain Miracle Mile. Long Island is, it's just house, corporate chain Miracle Mile, house. And there's no, there's no locally anything, there's no farms. Yeah. So
I'm just wondering.
Scenes are not, I don't remember there being like local scenes, and I could be wrong, and this could all be mythology that's just, in my head. It's someone from Long Island is going, what are you, crazy? There's all this cool stuff going on down there. But that's my story. I'm sticking to it.
I'm just wondering when did you start to notice that was Long Island that way your entire life? Was there a moment of change or a moment of realization where you realized that Long Island was that way? I didn't have a car when I was a kid. When I was a teenager, some of my friends did, so I didn't really have a broad overview of the area. And I just lived in that one little suburban town in Nassau County. I had lived out in Suffolk, but while I was growing up in the 60s and 70s, Long Island went from a place where there were plenty of potato farms and other farms to a place where pretty much it's all been turned into housing development as far as, I understand right now. It was a shock to come to Rochester. Binghamton is a little more like downstate than Rochester is. Rochester, and I had been in Albany for a while, and people still have New York accents in Albany. People order coffee in Albany. It's still there, and there's a bustle there, but when I came to Rochester, it took me a while to figure out that, like, you don't always have to say everything that comes to your mind. In Rochester, people have a filter and they're polite, and in Brooklyn, Long Island people just come, you got a booger on your nose, it's everything, there's no filter. One thing I do miss about Long Island is there's no bad pizza, and like the New York pizza line is Syracuse as far as I can tell, or maybe Utica. I think people would put the pizza line in different places. I'm going to say between Utica and Syracuse is where you go, where pizza turns from downstate, thin crust pizza into, people are confused and they think pizza is Chicago pizza, right? As it gets a thicker crust, so like Salvatore's is Rochester pizza. But, those of us who have figured it out now go to Pizza Stop on State Street. That's a great place, Pizza Stop.
Oh, my God. It's from Massapequa.
Is
from
he?
Long Island, yeah.
I had no idea.
Oh, yeah.
Oh.
Jerry Seinfeld's town.
Well, I'm thinking, so as you moved to Binghamton and then Albany.
Yeah.
Tell me about the transition to Rochester.
Yeah, we went to Massachusetts too.
Came
here. Yeah, came here for work. I thought I wanted to be a teacher. I could back up. I didn't know.
We can back up if you like.
Like that's an interesting thing. The fact that I wanted to be a teacher. I remember being a young man and not understanding how to come into the world, like how to come into being. How do I take my place in America, and I just couldn't figure it out. And it must have been something about the way me and my brother were raised, because he never did. Like, he lives off the grid. Like, he went from his house to CBGB's, the house where we grew up, to CBGB's, to a Grateful Dead bus, to living in Seattle, eating out of dumpsters and growing his own food. So he's kind of off the grid. And I was like, how do you, the world is upside down. I can't get my bearings in it. And I thought, and I read Summerhill, and I thought, I could be a teacher in a Summerhill type school. So because that was not Babylon. It wasn't Babylon. It was like a different way of thinking about how humans should interact, and schools would prepare people for honest interaction. I thought I could do that. I'm not going to compel anybody to learn anything, so it's pretty radically libertarian. And I thought I could do that. Come to find out, I'm not such a good teacher. And there I had a room full of 6 and 7-year-olds, and there were some things we had fun doing, and I could figure some stuff out. But ultimately, you need a certain level of charisma and human presence to get a bunch of 6-year-olds on task, thinking about, and not like falling on the floor and tussling with each other, or, playing Barbies under the table. So, time to move on. Yeah. So that's why we came to Rochester. I got a job at the Cobblestone School, which was, at that time, looked like a really neat alternative school. They were doing some really cool stuff, and I believe they still are.
I want to step back for a moment.
Okay.
You mentioned you need a human presence to keep people on task, or, little people in this case.
Yeah. Like a magnetism.
Yet as a community organizer, aren't you doing essentially the same with adults?
Well, that's so interesting, because I never thought about it. I just made the connection now that, yes, it's like I'm doing what I originally set out to do, which is I don't impose, as an organizer, I don't impose anything on anybody. So like Cobblestone would be like, okay, there's a certain amount. It wasn't libertarian at Cobblestone. There's a certain amount, and we need to take these kids through this curriculum, or we're going to have them do this exercise or this kind of thing. As an organizer, I come in and I go, what do you want to work on? You don't want to work? Fine, I'll go to the next street. I get called in by someone who wants, this is happening, or, we need to be more together. And, frequently you're called in because someone got broken into, or there's an open air drug market, or there's been a shooting. And that's why you're called in, and people, want to do something. So they're motivated to act. So you're just like, fine, how can I help? So you're not directing people or trying to move them towards anything that they're not ready to do. I think of myself as a midwife. My job is to say, breathe, push, and try sitting up this way, or lie down or something, squat. That's my job as an organizer. Whereas teachers, so it depends what kind of, but American schools, it's like you've got to learn this stuff, Have the baby now. I don't want to have a baby.
I'm wondering, how long did you spend in education?
So it was like 3 years and then another 5 years.
So 8 total?
Yeah.
How'd you get out?
The woman who was doing language classes, she was teaching the kids sign language, was also cleaning houses. And I was like, I can't do this anymore. And I have, a kid on the way, and I got a 3-year-old at home. And how do I provide for my family? And she's like, clean houses. So I went from, at a cocktail party being able to say, yes, I'm a teacher, to I'm cleaning houses, I'm delivering pizzas. My third job, though, was taking part in a labor think tank. So that was probably, I had some sense of I was unique in that way. But so interesting class, it was like a compression. I lost all my trappings of any aspirations to middle classness, and that was, I went through some mental gymnastics at that point in my life, and it was good. I think, I think class failure is probably good for everybody in America. Should have the rug pulled out from under them in order to better understand who they are as people and understand their place in society. Because I don't know that I could understand what's going on as well if I had just kind of been allowed to continue in my bubble.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
It makes me want to move on, jump a couple questions, but
jump ahead.
Why not? We'll jump ahead. I know when I messaged you, and I asked you to be on the show, you mentioned it's good to be alive at the end stages of capitalism.
That was kind of like dark humor, I guess. I don't know if I really feel that way. I'm not sure if these are the end stages of capitalism. We have entered some sort of turbocharged, exploitative version of capitalism. It's pretty incredible, and I see that and so I try to read my landscape that I'm working in terms of those kind of huge macroeconomic forces in the daily lives of people on a street, and try to understand the connections between Fed policy or trade agreements or entitlement programs, employment policies, or fiscal stuff, austerity. All these things play out in a very specific way in neighborhoods, and I've just I have a very tangible sense of what that kind of capitalism looks like, that kind of predatory winner-take-all stuff looks like in people's lives, in their psyches, in their friendships, in their families, and on the streets of their community. It's it's almost like it's trying to keep some sort of spiritual level of awareness as I go through my day. Just I went off the deep end there, but so yeah, what's going on now is insane. I mean, up is down and down is up. We're talking about so in Albany and DC, we're talking about we need to cut the deficit. Forget about the fact that the deficit has been going down, and the debt to GDP ratio is back where it's been, and it's definitely time to really look at things that are important, like the fact that half of Americans are earning around 20 grand, less than 20 grand a year or I just saw that today. It was like half of Americans are struggling, like they are really freaking struggling, and policies that are put in place are not creating more jobs. We don't have, the term stimulus became had negative connotations, and the Austerians seem to be carrying the day, and so what that means on a daily basis is that there's less community development block grant funding. There was $20 million a year that came in to Rochester in the 90s, and that meant housing, it meant programs, it meant people had assistance, and it's like less than half of that now. It might be a third of that number presently coming into the city. In the 70s, you had the state had programs to share state income with cities, so like Rochester, Syracuse, and Buffalo had these infusions of jobs. If you remember the CETA programs, and people could, first-time home buyers, and there were summer jobs programs, adopt a block, you could get paid to clean your street, and there were, there were opportunities for people who needed a hand up. And then you had Reagan, and it's like nothing, and he set the framework, and here we are, and it's just incredible. we get calls all the time from people who, maybe they're on Social Security or on disability. They're earning like 15 grand a year, 20 grand a year, maybe. And they've got a house, it's paid for. Taxes are 2 grand a year on their house, maybe. And now they've got and that's really hard for them. You earn, 15 grand, 2 grand is like a percentage of that. Yeah. I can't do math in public. And then they're, and then the roof goes, how do you repair a roof? Used to be that there'd be, federal funds, HUD, Housing and Urban Development Funds would be available for people, or community development block grants funds, and you could stay in your home. And now what you're seeing is there's so many people, senior citizens in Rochester without, who need their roofs repaired. And then the insurance comes in. We're looking at predatory insurance companies that come in and they cancel their mortgage insurance because their roofs aren't good. And we're not hearing about this in the suburbs. Maybe it's because people in the suburbs are, their roofs are fine, they can afford it. But we suspect that what's going on is that they're kind of like redlining, or they're looking specifically in the city, and they're just cutting people's mortgage insurance, which means that they then get thrown into other, more expensive pools. It's called forced placement. And so now you're in a situation where it's like the poverty tax. So, the milk is 3 times as expensive in the corner store. Your mortgage is now more expensive. Everything's more expensive if you're poor. And you want to cash a check. For some reason, people have been living on a cash economy. They don't go to the credit union. And now it takes in order to get your hands on your cash, it takes money to get your hands on cash. It's incredible. So that's, when I say what did I say? Last stages of capitalism, where this is some hyper stuff. Neighborhoods I'm working in, there's 50% unemployment. Average income, median family income is like 20 grand a year. And so people don't have a sense that I can shape my world. They don't have a sense that I can have an impact on the world. That's that hope thing, but it's also a sense of what we call agency, so the sense I can, I'm someone who is writing history. It's more like history's being done to me. And so that's a job of a community organizer. Go in there, walk the people. What do you want to change? Okay, figure out how to help them win, walk them through a few victories. They come out the other end of those experiences, and like a switch is flipped in their consciousness, and they now have a sense of, oh, okay, I'm a player. So that's what makes it worth it.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot in there to dissect here. I'm thinking you spoke about the sense of powerlessness, as I'd call it. Part of me feels it's intentional.
Right.
I think in terms of how capitalism works.
Well, it's certainly not in capitalism's interest. It's not in the interests of millionaires or people who own, the means of production. It's not in their interest to have low unemployment. It's much better for them when lots of people are unemployed and desperate for any kind of job. They'll take any kind of crappy job for any kind of low wage. And when they're working, they're less likely to split on you because there aren't a lot of jobs around. So high unemployment is really cool if you're someone who owns a factory or, a business.
That's horrifying. Yeah,
but it makes sense. Economic sense. I'm a millionaire and I want you to be desperate and choose to work in the cheapest possible conditions for the least amount of money, because the money I make is the difference between the productivity you create and what I pay you. I am getting rich off of your surplus value, right? So you make something that's worth, you create $100 of value in an hour. I'm going to give you $8 and I'm going to keep the 92 to myself. And that's what's changed. So the other thing about late stage capitalism is from the 40s to the late 70s, you had productivity increasing, and you also had wages increasing. So the graph of the graph of productivity rising, there was the line was mirrored by the line of wages, and so things, everybody got wealthy together, and that kind of fell apart in the 80s. And so what you have now is, we're still being more productive. You could say American workers are kicking ass. You could say the technology is enabling them to be more productive per hour they're working. And so they're creating even more value per hour that they're working. And yet the deal got broke in the 80s, and we've been flatlining in our wages, and we're not getting to participate in any of that extra surplus value we're creating. And that's why the 1% is just becoming phenomenally rich. I mean, they've just cut loose from our universe, and they're flying off into some other stratosphere.
Okay, so if you have this this chunk of society that has broken loose and is totally out there, can they be reeled back in? Is that possible? Do you have any idea what it would take for them to be reeled back in? Or is this a fatalistic situation where we're slowly sliding down to the end stages of capitalism?
Right.
The end of instead of end stages, the absolute end, I guess it would be.
Right. Well, I guess it would be oligarchy or some other archy. I don't know. I mean, it doesn't look good. So I can only analyze things as much as I can, but so you just kind of have to go against the things that don't look good and kind of, know you're going to die with your boots on and did the best you can and that take some solace from times in history when things have changed. So usually revolutionary moments come when the middle class gets pissed off. So there aren't a lot of times in history when revolutions happen because the peasants got screwed and they, we're going to take over. Mm-hmm. Usually it's what happens is you have folks who had a decent amount, and then that's taken away from them, and they're used to having their way or having some say, being at the table a little bit, or at least standing outside the door, and that pisses them off, and so any time that there's been any huge economic dislocations in terms of more equality, that's been the case, is my understanding. So, will the squeezed American middle class make a stink? At what point will the 20-somethings who owe $100,000 on their college debt, start to do the thing that changes the lever of power, whatever that is? And I don't know. I was an issues organizer and, was very humbled by the Occupy movement. We're out there trying to we're trying to frame things. If I knew the answer was camp out in the park and talk about the 1%, then I would have just done that 25 years ago. Who knew? But, so you never know. But what Occupy did was succeeded in changing the frame. Certainly didn't create a lasting institution, But now people talk about the 1%. You can say the 1%. I couldn't talk about the 1% 5 years. I did. Nobody knew what I was talking about. Or you'd like say, like to the upper three, the upper quintile, the upper 1% of the, and people would know what you're talking about. Now people do. So at least we have a vocabulary.
Wow. A ton in there. So you have an experience as this issues organizer. You said 20 years ago, 25 years ago?
Oh, well, I was always getting involved. So that going back to being like my brother, I went to school and I was like, I don't think humans are capable of anything. I just want to transcend and, enough with humanity. You guys are nuts. I'm out of here. And slowly, got pulled back to earth and started to get involved in like the anti-apartheid movement. And, solidarity with people in Central America and nuclear arms race. That was the stuff going on. And then did some community organizing in Binghamton. Well, actually, I did a survey, which was a part of community organizing. And so I always did something, right? Because I come from a radical family. So grandfather was in the Communist Party. My dad helped form the union at his workplace. My mom was a shop steward. She was a, early feminist, second wave feminist. So, I never had a chance to, just put on a polo shirt and report to work and make my way. So always doing something, but while I'm delivering pizzas and cleaning houses, I kind of backed my way into a $10 an hour job at Metro Justice for $20. So here's, who's stupid enough in this community to take $200 a week? So I raised my hand. Everybody else said no. So I wound up with the job. And so I spent 7 years, working with Metro Justice on a lot of progressive issues. And with hindsight, it's very interesting because, I remember being a little belligerent with a reporter once because they had characterized, is it fair to say you're a leftist organization? I was like, come to think of it, it's not leftist. Every position we've ever taken is a majoritarian. Everything that group did while I was there was the stance of a majority of people in Rochester or a majority of people in the United States or in New York. So it was, it's kind of like populist.
So do you believe that the majority of people in the United States lean left is not quite the right term, but in terms of social issues, they're closer to the left than they are the right, and I know it's a strange paradigm there, but
I don't know. Like the gay rights movement is just amazing. I mean, think about that. It's just in your lifetime, and it was actually your generation that did this. Mm-hmm. I remember going to the Metro Justice Board, it must have been like 5 or 6 years ago, and saying, I think there's a possibility that New York could pass an equal marriage law so that gay couples could get married in New York State. And I was like, wow, really? And we talked about it and we took the right stand, but we also looked at the polling. And not that you should look at polling when you do something, but it was approaching 50%, but the trajectory was like insane. It was like this steep climb, like it was about to skyrocket. And, now it's just a matter of there are small pockets of people who it's probably 60-40 right now. But I don't think if you're 30, I don't think it's like that for 20 and 30-year-olds. For 20 and 30-year-olds, it's probably like 80-20.
Definitely from my perspective, I think just about anyone who frowns on gay marriage that's around my age, and I'm 29. You're looked at like you have three eyes, basically.
Right.
It's I don't even think it's 80-20. I think it's probably closer to 90-10. I mean,
how did that happen? That was just incredible. It was like
I mean, does that kind of thing give you hope? I mean,
yeah, that and recycling. I love the recycling example. When I was a kid, nobody recycled.
Okay.
There was no box. Everything went in the landfill, and somebody said, you know what? I'm going to change the habit of every household in the United States. I'm going to. I think we should have our waste stream get smaller. And it's easy. All you have to no, it's not easy. It's hard. Every day you have to separate what you throw out, and then you have to build these facilities. And people would look at these visionaries and say, "You are crazy. Nobody's going to do that." And here we are. Who complains about returning 5-cent bottles? Who complains about putting the newspaper in the blue box? Everybody does it. So change is possible.
But I wonder, just from listening to you earlier, you seemed less optimistic,
right,
about capitalism as a whole. If these other things can change,
right,
perhaps capitalism can be fixed or adjusted or abolished or tweaked. Any number of options there. I would.
Well, so look at equal marriage in New York State. Cuomo pushed it through. It had 53% of New Yorkers in favor of it. It was marginally majoritarian, but he pushed it through anyway. Look at the minimum wage. Increasing the minimum wage to $10 is it's like something like 75% of New Yorkers want it. I could be totally wrong, but it's like wildly more popular than equal marriage was, and yet we're not getting it. So, we're getting a small minimum wage, and we couldn't even get it tied to inflation. So inflation is going to erode the gains anyway, and we're going to have to get another Albany legislature to go through the whole process again, because we couldn't win the big victory, which was tying it to inflation. We couldn't get the big number. I think it's going up to $9 next year. It's going up to $8 now. So why is it so hard to get? Why is it a lot easier to get a social win than an economic win? And that's because there are forces that don't want a minimum wage, and the forces that don't want to lose their billions are very powerful and have a bigger impact on state legislatures. They campaign cash and all that. So that's what so it might be easier to win immigration than it is to win increased rights for unionization, or to win trade agreements that help American workers, or to win, an easy thing that Obama could do tomorrow, which is to get Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac to write down the principal on mortgages. Imagine that the impact that would have on the American economy if they just said, you know what, you're underwater, forget about it. We're going to force the banks to, or we're going to, Freddie Mae, we have the power. Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, we have the power to do this. We were going to push down your principal. It would be huge, and it's not happening. So it's what we're up against. Wall Street.
You mentioned hope earlier, and you just mentioned President Obama. Now we're 5 years in. Do you feel that he's sensitive to these issues at all?
He's the president that, for the first time in his address to the nation, said we're going to take a cut out of the community service block grant funding. So he targeted what I do for a living for a cut, and my agency, Action for Better Community, took a huge cut. Head Start teachers, we all got furloughed. I took a hit. People were fired. So he's pulling a Clinton on us. We're getting Sister Souljad. He's being tough on entitlements, and he recently started to talk about inequality, and we'll see where that goes. But the reality is we get calls every day. People with can't fix their houses. They have a job. They're at wit's end. Somebody came in the office the other day who has multiple sclerosis. He can't get his Medicaid off the ground. He's waiting. He could wait for a year to get social SSD, the disability payments. This guy has no funding. All he's got is food stamps. He's got no cash coming in. He's about to get foreclosed on. He owns his own home. He can't pay taxes, and his heater went out. So we actually do have funding to help him with his heater. So we're going to try to help him with that. But the system isn't helping him. He's having to, even Obamacare can't make the system go faster. Yeah. How's that hopey changey stuff working for you now?
What I'm hearing from you all throughout all this are these sort of structural defects and sort of utter malfunctions.
Or is the system broken, or is it working perfectly well as it was designed to work?
Is that what you believe?
Oh yeah, sure. So
this goes back to the worker wage issue.
Well, it goes back to the founding of our nation. The Senate. Like, why does Utah have 2 senators, and New York State has 2? Utah, New York, like, that's crazy. Well, the Senate was designed as, we're not a parliamentary democracy. You don't have minority, small parties able to form coalitions to kind of twist the ruling coalition to the left or to wherever, the populace. So we have winner take all system, put it, carved in stone in the 18th century. The Senate was designed as a saucer to cool the passions of the House of Representatives, so things to slow it down, and so we're actually designed to out of the fear of the rabble, the populist uprisings that were going on at that time, and so our whole system came about after that, and then you've got corporations at the turn of the last century getting the rights of regular folks, their people, and so they are able to. So you have all these incredible court decisions, and they're coming down the pike where corporations are saying they have the right to their free speech. They have free speech rights, and so they have part of their free speech. In 1974 was Supreme Court ruled that they have the right to, in Buckley v. Vallejo, they have campaign contributions cannot be limited, or campaign cash is their free speech rights, right? So that's the decisions now that are going on are all going back to that logic that you can't limit their free speech. Cash is speech, and you can't. And now they're trying to say you can't tell us to post things about worker protections because that's limiting our speech. So that's the structure of the system built, or at least case law, all the ways that the pieces come together. Yeah. So that's kind of scary.
Does it wear on you?
So,
Personally.
Yeah, so I can't watch CNN. Like, that's torture. That's like Clockwork Orange torture to me. I just, to me, I get my hope. And it's tough to go to meetings. Like, a lot of my life is meetings with residents talking about speed bumps. and the need for better lighting on the street, or better security, or to come together just to have a block party or something. But in those, and a lot of the meeting is, it's a lot of humans being human. So it's the drama. But what keeps me going is seeing people, start at saying there's nothing you can do, and then coming a year later and going, hey, what about if we did this? They're starting to think like strategists. They've totally gone from like, all they can do is complain to, I think I know how we can fix this. And that's what keeps me going. Just like being continually encountering the human spirit, the human drive to make the world a better place and connect with other people. And, people, I don't run into the people in the community who want to take advantage of other people in the community. That's pretty cool. I get to spend my time with the people in the community who are concerned about making the community a better place. They pay me to do that. That's pretty cool.
That begs the question.
Yeah.
Locally, without naming names, do you think it's a large percentage of the population that wants to take advantage of people, or is it every business owner of a certain size? Is it like who are these people who are taking advantage of the rest of us?
So it's in small ways. If someone has a small business and they're earning $80,000 a year, they're hiring people who earn $16,000 a year, maybe, So that's a small way that they're not getting fantastically rich. So that's a small way that maybe they're taking advantage of other people. It's kind of hard to blame them for that, because the rules of the game are that you do get to pay people $8 an hour. And, you do get to charge $1.50 for a cup of coffee and $3 for a beer. So that's all acceptable. And so, but the fact is, if they're making 80 and their help is making 20, you could slide it more to 70-30 or 40-60, maybe that's better. But I reserve my venom for, the Walmarts of the world that actually, hire lawyers to make sure they don't have to pay out on class action lawsuits for keeping women from having managerial positions. That's just come on, that's straight up evil. Like it's when you get in a room and start, talking about how do you consolidate your gains and keep the rest of the people out of the room. That's when you go from kind of yucky to gross, special place in hell in my mind. But, on the other hand, there's there was just a movie about Hannah Arendt, is the banality, and she's famous for the phrase, the banality of evil. Was Adolf Eichmann, the Nazi, was he a special kind of evil, or was he just a functionary in the party, just like, doing what he was told and just being a regular Joe, so there's that concept also. So it almost doesn't even help to talk about good and evil. It's just like, we're just going to keep making sure that people are treating each other with respect. So, and you had that movement of multiculturalism in the 80s. And so there was a movement on campuses and to try to treat people with more respect. And then the pushback against that was, oh, you're being politically correct. You're telling us what we should do. And so you had a lot of anger. But there's a push and pull with that. And, I think we've made some progress. Maybe not. It's hard to tell. But that guy, the Duck Dynasty dude, he's getting called out. There's a bunch of people. Oh, Fox is selling a lot of advertising on the aggrieved entitlement and the anger. But the fact is, everybody's talking about what a dickwad this guy is. So, yeah.
The Duck Dynasty guy is interesting because I find myself torn on the issue a bit.
Do tell.
I'm a big proponent of free speech.
Mm-hmm.
Yet, it's an interesting, line that I'm walking here. So it's
right. What is he on, AMC?
No, I believe it's Discovery Channel.
Oh, Discovery, right.
I think. I'm not sure. Yeah. I've never seen the show before.
Well, so, at a certain point, it's like, do the cons outweigh the pros? And so the capitalist,
they caved.
The cable company. No, they rehired him.
Yeah, that's what I mean. No. They caved.
Well, or did they? Did they do a calculation and go, actually, we can make more money by keeping him on? More people are now watching this show. We got more eyeballs for the commercials because people are like, what is this dickwad all about? Now they're tuning in. So maybe
would it be I wonder if that would be a temporary pop. Or would those people actually stay and keep continuously watching?
Yeah.
I think you're correct that that there would be a temporary pop.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure that
right.
most of America would stay. It's already crazy popular, especially for cable.
Right. So and I was in Gander Mountain buying wool socks, and they've got they've got merchandising deals. So it's like that scene in Fight Club where he's talking about what he does for a living, and he works for an insurance company, and he calculates whether it's worth it to let someone live or something, and it's like, so these guys are making economic decisions, should we let this blatant homophobe stay on the show? What makes us more money? Getting rid of them or keeping them? Bottom line, I don't think they really care either way.
I agree that they don't really care. Yeah. I think they don't. I do personally. I do care that he has the ability to say it. The one thing that scares me, and a lot of the flaps that I hear, is when some say that you can't say something. I personally believe that you can say stuff and you have to deal with consequences.
Yeah.
So I feel like what truly worries me, and I heard this during this flap, and I heard this in the other Twitter flap with the has Justine landed? I don't know if you heard about that.
No. What am I missing?
Wow. Okay, so she's this PR agent in New York. And the details will help. So she was originally from Johannesburg. Her family moved to the U.S. She became a PR agent for this big company. And she was flying from London to Johannesburg. And before she got on a plane, she tweeted. To paraphrase, it was, gone to Africa, hope I don't get AIDS.
Oh, wow.
So over about 8 hours, Twitter and the entire internet basically annihilated her career.
Whoops. See, that's why I'm scared about doing this. I'm like, what have I just done?
There was a hashtag called Has Justine Landed? There were guys waiting at the airport who took her picture.
Oh, wow. Wow, that is how fast it now moves. Things just got interesting.
So, I was reading in an article how, she should know better and that it's not funny. And I don't think it's funny at all.
Right.
And she should probably know better. I don't know that I want to prevent her from doing it.
Right.
And I feel...
So natural consequences.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think that a growing part of the population feels that censorship, as long as it's feels good, is okay. And I think that censorship, once it, I don't think they realize that censorship goes both ways.
Mm-hmm.
It can be used for good and it can be used for ill. You can censor things that should be public, that should be well known. And because we've decided that, hey, we shouldn't consume this, we shouldn't say that, that those phrases, those thoughts can be kept down.
So you're free to say what you want, and I guess there are exceptions to that. And then you also free to suffer the consequences.
Yeah.
So part of the consequences is a bunch of people exercising their free speech rights to call for your firing.
Correct. Yeah.
You know, so what you can't do is complain about the people calling for your firing and saying they're like messed up.
Right.
It's
right.
like, all right, you did the blooper, or you spoke your mind and didn't realize that you're pissing people off. People are now calling for your firing. All right, so we're talking about two groups of, speech and speech. So who gets to complain about the speech and the speech? So that's just craziness on top of craziness, that people would complain that oh no, they're telling us what not to say. They're the politically correct police are out there. Watch yourself. It's like, well, no, your knuckles are getting wrapped. Deal with it.
Do you think it's overthinking the concept?
It's trying to exploit it so that you can say whatever you want. There are people who just want to, so it's aggrieved entitlement syndrome, right? So there are folks who are just like, look, for the past 200 years, I've been able to say whatever the hell I want and do it and throw my weight around. And now all of a sudden the world looks different and I don't have it. It's not as easy for me to do that anymore. And so people get pissed at me and start yelling at me. And then I'm going to start talking about how messed up they are for yelling at me. Like, wait a minute, that's wrong.
My only counter is that I know that there are moments where in the media in particular has chosen to ignore a story for whatever reason, or downplay a story.
Right. Well, what is we had this conversation over lunch. What is the news?
Yes.
Oh my God.
But a filter. I mean, that's what it is. It's a filter and it's a curator, right? So like they do constant analysis and constant thought, thinking about what their specific audience wants.
Well, every week in Rochester, you get a story about somebody getting shot. When was the last time you heard a story about somebody trying to get the roof fixed? When was the last time you heard a story about someone who lost their job? Or someone who just dropped out of school? I mean, so the kid who got killed was killed by another kid. They both dropped out of school, right? And why did they drop out of school? So where's this, so there are all these stories that they didn't cover. Yeah. So, yeah. So you were saying about the stories that don't get covered.
Yeah. Well, I think that those choices are made. Okay, I think I know this for sure, that there's a star system.
Yeah.
And that much like with movies where there are certain actors who can walk into a studio's office and say, I want to do this project, no matter how crazy it is, no matter how expensive it is, I want to do this. They get it done.
Yeah.
And there's some actors that get 2/3 of them done. And there's some actors that get one of them done.
Yeah.
I think that in Rochester, and I think in a lot of the media, those stars, new and old, can determine coverage, and I think that's about a third of all news coverage.
Wow, that's interesting.
So if you were to get a piece of a press release from a certain pillar of the community, whatever the organization is, they can't demand coverage, meaning they can't pound the table, and say, you better come here.
Yeah, but I bet their emails get open. I know because I track, I use MailChimp to my media press release.
Sure.
I got 50% openage. You know,
Sure.
they're only opening, half of them are opening the press releases. So I do the follow-up phone call. Oh, I mean, what was, yeah, so.
So Action for a Better Community, I think, is on that list.
No. Well, we get 50%.
Yeah,
well, it's not an ABC, it's me.
Okay.
If Mr. Norman sends it out, the executive director, I bet it would be 100% openage.
Oh, without question. Yes.
Yeah, so, me, it's and I send out the stories about, the neighborhood group doing this or that. These are the stories that don't get told. But, Lieutenant Governor Duffy sends out a press release. Boom.
Without question.
Now it's getting discussed at the morning, what is it called? The editorial meeting?
Editorial meeting, morning meeting.
Morning, yeah. Right.
I have to.
Yeah.
That was an interlude.
James aspirates and I performed the Heimlich maneuver on him. God, I'm glad I was able to get that hairball up.
Well, I feel so lucky you're here because you saved my life.
Well, you're welcome anytime.
Well, we've gone into a pretty dark place in this interview, and you articulated how sad some of the situations that you described are just horrific.
Well, and if I could just polish it up, my experience with a lot of people who are facing tremendous hurdles, some folks are just like beaten down. But a lot of people aren't beaten down. Their minute by minute existence is they're naturally buoyant people. But what I see is it takes a toll in their physical bodies. So what you see is just like, people get sick and then, things start to break down in their bodies. And so you see this in distressed neighborhoods. There's a higher incidence of all kinds of chronic diseases. And I haven't studied this, but I just can't help thinking that it's just all the stress. I mean, people, a lot of people I'm working with, they don't live in the front room of their house. They spend most of their time in the back room because there's too much drama and chaos out on the street. And a lot of people get into conflicts with their neighbors and neighbors who are armed or, and then there's police. And so people have, this high level of fight or flight going a lot. And I think it just wears them down. But so I don't know if they're unhappy. I don't think they're any less, like they're facing certainly more challenges than I and my wife do. In their day-to-day life. My big thing was, my dishwasher broke down. Damn, yeah, I think unhappiness settles in the body. That's the stress. The stress is taking its toll. Maybe that way. So, yeah. Sorry. Yeah.
No. I certainly, personally, I grew up really, really, really poor. Grew up in a housing project.
In Rochester?
In Rochester.
Which one?
Durand Street, South Plymouth Avenue.
Oh, okay.
They were demolished when did we move out? We moved out in about 2000.
Okay.
and they were condemned. And then while I was away at school, so I want to say 02.
Okay.
They were all demolished and flattened, and they've been replaced by a bunch of like townhouse looking.
Yeah, so that's all that new development over there.
Yes.
Yeah, just before the traffic circle or
Yeah,
something.
right after the traffic circle.
Yeah.
So if you're heading toward the U of R, so you come out of the traffic circle, head toward the U of R, all that new stuff. There used to be like these like we had a hole in our roof for ever.
So this was Rochester Housing Authority?
Yes.
And so they weren't taking care of it as well.
Oh yeah, they were falling apart. Like the entire place was like a utter shithole.
And was it were there a lot of units all congregated together?
There were these sort of townhouse kind of
right.
setups.
So it's like 4 in a row here, 4 in a row there.
8 in a row, 8 in a row,
okay.
8 in a row.
So what was your day-to-day experience? Like, what was the drama as a teenager?
Well, at a certain point, I remember coming home to a lot of yellow tape.
Yeah.
And being like, oh, shit.
Yeah.
And, like, at a certain point, oh, shit was like, eh. And, like, I usually explain poverty to people who have no idea as lack of depth perception.
Yeah.
So when you lose your depth perception and everything, and all you know and all you worry about are your absolute immediate concerns.
Right.
When you see crossing tape, police tape that's blocking off part of the road, you're mad because you can't cross the street. You're not mad because something terrible has happened.
Yeah. Did you think that it had any impact?
Oh, absolutely.
On you? I mean, it had an impact on my being that I couldn't cross the street a lot, or that you were surrounded by the possibility of a stray there are a couple specific things. My mom was very protective. Obviously, you hope most moms would be, but she just, you grew up in the projects and went to college.
Yeah,
you were not the standard issue kid who, so yeah,
absolutely.
Most kids didn't.
That's true.
Right.
I'm a lucky guy. And I worked hard.
Right.
It was a combination of the two.
Yeah,
it's a combination of the two, honestly. Yeah. I think I ended up with a mom who kind of kept me inside a lot.
Yeah.
And sort of tried to shield me as much as she could.
Did she whisper the depth perception into your ear? Was she, so my experience, my experience when I was broke in the 90s was day to day. Yeah, I'm going to hustle and everything is like, I got this, I got a wad of cash or checks on my dresser. So it's like, yeah, pay this bill, day to day, and no long-term planning. And I think that, so it's...
For the most part.
Right?
I think the only long-term thing with me that my mom said a couple things. A, you're going to graduate high school.
Right.
There's no way that you're not going to graduate high school.
Right.
And then you're either going to get a job or you're going to go to college, one or the other. And B, she told me my entire life that she expected great things of me.
Yeah.
And that was non-negotiable.
Wow.
She never said what those things were.
Yeah.
No specifics. I think she was too busy. I mean, she raised 7 of us.
Yeah.
But she made it clear that she set certain goals. She did what she could to help me along the way. I think she also felt that I was an atypical kid.
Yeah.
So she sort of like she felt as long as she set parameters that I could manage myself in a lot of ways. And she was right about some. In most of the big ways, I was able to keep, to go through school, and I was able to get into college. I was able to but others, it was a different story. But in terms of the neighborhood's effect on me, what I didn't realize until honestly college, like just talking to kids about how they grew up and what was going on in their lives and what their high schools were like, and like I was even talking to one of my college friends over the weekend, and it was like, oh, I've never been in a fight in my life, and I'm like, like
that was my
what?
experience too. Yeah. How is that possible?
Yeah, you grow up, you know that you have to.
Well, so when you grow up in a distressed part of a community, right, where you got to be hard, right?
Or give the appearance of hard.
Give the appearance of hard, right? So it's like toughness becomes the value.
Sure.
But isn't that connected to our, economic system?
Absolutely, yeah.
Because you can't claim your manhood you can't be a man because you can't. The path to manhood is not get a job, provide for your family, because those doors have been closed. And you can't be a man by having impact in the community, right? Mm-hmm. Because those doors are closed or harder to get through. So it's almost like you got to be a Superman to be a man. So screw that. I'm going to be a man in these other ways.
I think you put the nail on the head. The head on the nail. Hit the hammer with the nail.
But that does resonate with you.
Absolutely. I think that there was a ton of posing, and a lot of posing that I saw, that I do see in other parts of society, but I see them in less overtly physical and overtly intimidating ways. Like, there's a bar that I frequent, and if you start screaming at someone or get in someone's face, you're tossed.
Yeah.
And at a lot of parts of our community, if you're in a bar and you start screaming at someone,
yeah.
I'm
going to get this on YouTube soon.
Yeah. I mean, World Star Hip Hop exists for a reason. I don't know if have you been to that site?
No.
It's a primarily black site.
Yeah.
That's pretty much all videos like we've explained, like you just said. Just like just shot camera phones.
Yeah.
Of crazy stuff happening.
So I'm forgetting the name of it. So Elijah Anderson writes about this phenomenon, kind of like it's the breakdown of social norms.
Sure.
Right? So William Julius Wilson writes about when jobs disappear, when work disappears, right? What happens to a community? Mm-hmm. And so that's one of the things, like social. So you have a bunch of people in a community, and those are the folks I work with, is the people who have the gardens in their front yard and go to church and are trying to hold it down and, pull up your pants. And like when there's a fight, you stop it. You don't celebrate the gladiator encounter for the social status of vanquishing the other guy, and so that's a norm that has, it's a battle. Well, what we're seeing right now in the community is a battle over that norm, and what's going to prevail.
Totally.
Yeah.
And I don't know that I'm terribly helpful I don't. It's not that I think that we're too far gone. I feel like it would have to be the generation behind us. But I think the kids that are my age, you know, I'm turning 30, they've been, even just encountering them, you know, perfect example. All right, I come home from college. It's like, I think it's my third year. And I ran into this kid. His name was Tommy. And Tommy and I went to school together for 8 years. First grade through 8th grade. And when I told Tommy I was away at school, he kind of looked at me puzzled. He looked, and he was like, "Oh, well, you're always a smart kid." Like, all right. I hadn't seen Tommy for years. So I'm on another bus a few years later, and I see him, and I just saw him. When you mentioned the physical toll earlier, you could see just working crap jobs, eating crap food. I don't know if he's, being beat up physically, but being beat up emotionally.
Yeah.
Totally. Like, sort of like, yet his spirits were high. I mean, he was like, one of the things that you've mentioned throughout is that most people, even in these worst of conditions in our cities, are generally upbeat. They're usually the nicest people to encounter in a lot of cases. But he just saw me, and he was like, there was this disconnect.
Right. You're not one of us now.
Yeah.
You did that thing. You sailed off the end of the world.
Yeah, pretty much. Like, what are you doing here?
Well, and like part of that thing, like, I use the politically correct term as distressed community, but ghetto, right?
Yes.
So go back to the, original, a wall around, and you don't go out, and you don't bridge, or you don't, that world out there is unknowable and not what you do, right? So it's kind of you talked about narrowcasting, a restricting, a constricting of opportunity, to see, and it's just the tragedy is to see people, take part in it to themselves, to participate in their own restriction, and it's just sad. And so you have the entire system. I wanted to get this in this podcast. You have the entire system set up to like close down opportunities so that you have pools of unemployed, right? So it's like crucially have pools of, and they're the folks that are going to discipline the current workers, right? But then you have so many unemployed, it's just like, people, they do things like, the social norms tend to about fighting get loose. So now you need more people so we're going to create programs and not anti-violence programs, right? So now you send in a bunch of good people who want to do good with mops and buckets. Mm-hmm. So it's an incredibly inefficient. So, there's a gazillion people in town who are getting paid middle class or sub-middle class wages to go and like try to fix some of the problems created by that system. It's the fighting, it's the teenage pregnancy, and but all those things are symptoms of doors closed, no restriction of opportunity. And then you actually pay people to say there's another world out there. Like the system just got done training everybody that there isn't a world out there. So that's just crazy.
It kind of reminds me of an anecdote. I know some people who opened up, mostly activists, who opened up a building in the neighborhood.
Yeah.
And I told them prior to opening up this building that if you simply just open up a building in one of these distressed communities and you don't interact with the community,
Yeah.
you're essentially a spaceship that has just landed. And they're going to look at you like you're ET.
Yeah.
That if you're going to interact, you're going to go into these communities and not be a gentrifier, essentially.
Yeah, that's a big, that's like urban myth too.
Yeah.
There's a lot of urban myths, like, oh, they're coming to take our neighborhoods. Like, you should be so lucky.
Yeah, yeah.
There are no developers with designs. The thing is, they've forgotten about your neighborhood. You should be so lucky that that's the problem. Oh my God. They can't even remember your side of the map. You have to stand up and fight in order to get them to try to conspire against you.
It does feel that way. It does feel like that parts of Rochester feels like they are walled off.
Yeah.
In terms of, it's all mental.
Yeah, you can take a bus out to Wayne County, or but so that people are complicit in their own oppression. It's I hate to say that, but it's a two-way street, and we internalize racism, we internalize the norms, we kick the dog, so rather than lashing out at the people who are messing with our heads, we lash out at people who are less powerful than us. Yeah.
Can you think of a step that we could take to, obviously we can't fix this in one step, but a step that we can all take to bridge some of these gaps, to sort of address some of these problems? Are there
Well, I'm a firm believer in winning. I think people just need to get in the habit of winning, and those guys need to get in the habit of losing. And we need to think about getting them in the habit of losing and winning a few. And we need to get a lot of people getting in the habit of working together on their common interests. So, in the Northeast, when I started working at ABC, nobody in the North, none of the neighborhood groups were working together. They were all in their different silos. Well, there's a bunch of community organizers. We started to come together, and I'd like to think that I played some sort of enzyme role in that process. Now neighborhood groups, the people in neighborhood groups are talking to get each other, and we're talking about forming a quadrant-wide organization and working on social public policy issues. So, getting our fair share of community development block grant funds into that neighborhood. I think when people start winning and, other power brokers have to make room at the table, I think you need to change the power dynamic. And that's always the solution. Change the power dynamic. Help people grab more power.
Does that change in the power dynamic scale up?
Yeah, that I don't know. So I think about that sometimes. So in my wildest dreams, I continue to do this job for 10 years. Neighborhood groups get a seat at the table. Developers have a certain respect for what's going on, and elected leaders consult with them. In the city, but so how does that scale up to Albany, and how does that scale up to Washington, D.C.? Well, there are some national groups. Used to be groups like Acorn, but there are other groups like National People's Action. So how do you interact with so how do you get groups that have, cut their teeth on speed bumps in the neighborhood and security in the neighborhood to then link arms with other neighborhood groups about housing policy in the United States? or, you know, the fight about over Social Security. And so for me as a personal challenge, I have to think about how I can bridge that and do the scaling up. But the first step is helping people feel their power and overcoming their isolation from each other.
Well, Jon, thanks for coming.
All right, man. Thank you.
Thanks again to Jon Greenbaum for joining me. For One-on-One, I'm James Brown. Be well.
There's a lonely man inside. Life is a three-ring circus, all of the ups and downs of a carousel that I know so well. Life is a three-ring circus, just one little ride on a merry-go-round, going round and round and round and round and round. He does the dance like the minstrels did, just to please the king.